within the Philadelphia Eagles community, the fan base in the front office seem to have the greatest difference of opinion surrounding the quarterback number 2 position. The front office, they're pretty excited to see these young guys kind of play out there on the field. The fan base, though, the fan base fears that there is a true variance between the 2024 and 2025 rosters when it comes to the combination of Darius Slay and Isaiah Rodgers versus Adoree Jackson and Jacorian Bennett on that field. Personally, I actually really like the prospects of Jacorian Bennett becoming a player in this league. Also, while not a popular opinion, I do think Adoree Jackson is a decent placeholder until Jacorian's role is ready for him. Neither of these guys are Darius Slay, and I want to be very clear about that. Darius Slay was a constant professional. Of course, we had a love-hate relationship with Darius Slay throughout the years, but I personally, and I'm pretty sure many of you would never deny the fact that he was a very, very solid football player for us all the way up to his final year here as a starting field side corner, left cornerback within this system. So the real question is, Adoree versus Jacorian versus Isaiah Rodgers. Did we make a mistake basically letting Isaiah Rodgers walk for $5 million or so? I think one of the most interesting aspects that I learned about these players while reviewing this topic for you guys is the fact of how similar they are in body frame. It's quite astonishing, like the fact that you're kind of looking at the same player repeatedly here. Give me a second, I'm going to walk through exactly what these players are and the origins of this player, as far as I can tell. For me, when I think of sub 6 feet cornerbacks with really good movement speed and the ability to play laterally and vertically that are tremendous athletes, to me, it all starts with one former New England Patriot in Jonathan Joseph. Jonathan Joseph at the Combine came in and measured about 5'11", 193 pounds. He had 31-inch arm reach, 9 5/8 inch hand reach. He ran a 4.38 40 with a 1.53-10 split, a 37-inch vertical, 123-inch broad jumps, about 10 feet and like 3-inch broad jumps around that area, guys. A 6.923 cone and a 4.23 short shuttle, showing you some of that lateral movement ability mixed in with explosiveness, right? Over a 10-foot broad jump, 37-inch, vertical jump. This young man with a 1.5 something, split in terms of the 10 split, very explosive sub 6 foot outside cornerback in the league. Let me flip and let's talk for a second about Isaiah Rodgers, who we kind of long for a little bit, right? It's a guy that we feel like maybe we shouldn't let him get away. Isaiah Rodgers, tough player to evaluate here because Isaiah Rodgers, unfortunately, he came in during the pandemic years and there was, pro days got canceled. It was really, you were talking about private workouts basically is where we're getting information from here. He came in at 5'10", 170 pounds. Definitely lighter than every other cornerback we're going to talk about, but still within the same range of things. We don't know his arm reach. We don't know his wingspan. We really don't know his hand measurement. And oftentimes when you look up sources, the sources they're wrong. They're using Kenny Moore II's measurements because in an article that was produced by the Colts that talked about Isaiah Rodgers and excitement around him, also linked and talked about Kenny Moore being a smaller corner with tremendous arm reach. And people ran with it, and it's not correct, actually. So even if you use ChatGPT, they're giving you wrong information. We really don't know. I would suppose, just given what we've seen him play on the field, that he's above 30 inches in the arm reach, probably 31 inches or so. That's probably where his arm reach is. So 74-inch wingspan, roughly, probably somewhere in that area, I would imagine. He ran a 4.31 40 on his first attempt. But then on his second attempt, this man went out there and ran a 4.28 40-yard dash. We don't know the splits, but, let's just do the math, guys. If you're running sub 4.3 40-yard dashes, then you're probably running at worst like a 1.51, 1.52, 10 split. And it's more than likely he's in the high 1.4s, like a 1.48, 1.47, somewhere in that area. He had a 40-inch vertical leap and a 6.93 cone. Fluid hips, good lateral movement, good vertical movement, tremendous athlete, sub 6 feet corner. It's a guy that a lot of us felt like maybe we should have just spent $5 million. I know we're trying to save money at some spots, but I think a lot of us kind of felt the same way here. Adoree Jackson, the veteran man who's about to take over that spot and kind of hold it down until some of these players are probably ready to assume the duties here. Adoree Jackson, 5'10", 186 pounds, 31 3/8 inch arm reach, a 9 1/4 inch hand measurement, a 4 4.2 40-yard dash. He had a 1.5-1.10 split. Very twitchy, especially when you consider it was a 4.4. A 36-inch vertical leap, 122-inch broad jump. Those are good numbers, but they're not like crazy tremendous numbers, right? You could definitely tell by looking at some of these dudes, they absolutely had outside-inside versatility. They can move just as well vertically as they can laterally, fluid hips, tremendous athletes. These guys, definitely give you, especially as your fourth corner, like they can pretty much back up, or your third corner, if you will. They can pretty much back up almost any position. Jacorian Bennett. Jacorian Bennett is a player that I'm looking forward to the most seeing out there, and this is a tremendous athlete, guys. This is a guy that I think there's some ability here. I think he could do quite well. 5'11", 188 pounds, 31.875-inch arm reach. I think is like 31 7/8 inches. A 9.125, somewhere in that area is like 9 1/8, something, somewhere in that area, or 16th, I can't remember. Just basically above a 9-inch hand measurement. A 4.3 40 with a 1.48-10 split. That's tremendously explosive, guys. A 40.5-inch vertical and 133-inch broad jump. This dude has all the athletic abilities here. And then when I went and searched his film, and I was searching some of the advanced analytics, what stood out to me right away is the fact that this young man, within that Las Vegas Raiders system, played over 200 snaps of man coverage, which led that entire team. Although his grading out, he wasn't quite what Isaiah Rodgers was. Isaiah Rodgers, and I'm not saying that Isaiah Rodgers is literally the best corner in man coverage in the league last year. I'm saying he graded out as the highest graded corner, above 20% of a snap percentage in terms of the filters. He graded out as the highest in man coverage. Now, obviously, the more man coverage you play, the more you get exposed to things, the more likely that numbers would come down a little bit. But it still shows you that Isaiah Rodgers, who was an incredible athlete, when they put him out there in man coverage, he was able to do the deal. And I do feel the same way that Jacorian Bennett has that same kind of upside. This is the guy I'm excited to see inside of Vic Fangio's scheme. And the last player I'll throw out there for you is Mac McWilliams. 5'10", 191 pounds, 29.875-inch arm reach, so like 29, like 7/8 inches. Somewhere in that area, guys. He's roughly around that area, 15, 16th, whatever. He's right around that area in terms of the arm reach. He's just short of 30 inches. Normally, you want your outside corners to have 30-inch arm reach or greater, but, I mean, we're splitting hairs here at like an eighth to a 16th of an inch. An 8 3/8-inch hand measurement, so smaller hands for a cornerback, to be quite honest. A 4.4 140 with a 1.52-10 split and a 34-inch vertical. You can see that, I mean, they're all sub-6-foot corners. They all have very specific numbers in the terms of the 10 splits. They're all roughly running a 4.4 and below, like a 4.44 below 40, basically, to play outside for this team. Like, there's a pattern here to the type of players that they brought in for Vic to play inside of that, like, kind of that field area, that field corner area, if you will. When we talk about this cornerback number 2 position, I want to speak clearly about what I think the real concern is for the players and like why there's some legitimate concern to say, like, depending on how things play out here, this could be concerning and a major drop-off from Darius Slay. And I think what you're talking about is you got to start with the coverage shell, which pre-snap, pretty much Vic's going to come out the majority of the time giving you a cover 2 look. It doesn't mean that would be post-snap. But we know pre-snap, he likes to give you that quarters look. It could be a drop quarters, which would be like basically a zone match kind of system, or it could be basically like his normal quads coverage, which is like a man match inside of the quarters-based system. Even in quads where he's playing a nickel, you got to be careful because this concept I'm about to explain to you, which will place essentially the field corner, or it could be technically the boundary too, just depends on where the passing strength is. But basically the weak side corner, the corner away from the passing strength, gets placed a little bit in ISO because of the way Vic plays his coverages. So when teams go 3-by-1 in particular is where you really see this, stand out. So this could be in bunch formations. It could just be a standard 3-by-1, or it could be a 3-by-1 where you got a tight end attached to formation just towards the passing strength, if you will. Anytime you see a 3-by-1 where they have a nickel base in there, you're going to have a concept that's called tricks, okay? The tricks concept means that basically your weak side corner, the corner that is away from the passing strength, is going to play and keep his eyes across the middle of the field looking for crossers. In breaking routes or crossers coming across the middle of the field to where he can essentially rob the play if he can. That's a tricks concept. The problem with that is that you will often see these players square their bodies towards that side of the field, and they're only playing off a field for what's going on behind them. So a lot of times that can leave that corner in isolation. And if that corner is in isolation, things can go a wire, to be quite honest here. You know what I mean? Like, you're going to have to stay in the hip pocket. You hear how he talk about these guys. He talks about their ability to stay in the hip pocket. That is important. You got it. Another way of saying hip pocket guys, technically what he's trying to say is they're staying in phase. That is important. You are going to be an island on some of these plays, especially from a quads, which is a quarters-based coverage, right, where they have the nickel on the field, and in the backside over there, the weak side away from the passing strength is going to have some isolation there because they're robbing with that safety. The other place where I see this play out some, and I want to alert and bring people's attention to the film so they can see it, is when Vic plays his cover 8. So the difference between cover 6 guys and cover 8 has to do with the way you're playing the passing strength. So in cover 6, you're playing quarters towards the passing strength, and then you're playing like a cover 2 or half towards the weak side. But in cover 8, you're reversing it. You're going to basically play half or cover 2 towards the passing strength, okay, and then you're going to play quarters towards the weak side. So when you're in cover 8, so half, cover 2 towards passing strength, but quarters towards the back end, that quarters safety that's on the back end is going to play tricks normally, especially versus 3x1 sets. This can still happen against 2x2 sets too, but it's primarily played against 3x1 sets. So you got to think about this logically. If you're having a guy who's always looking to rob the middle of the field, then you're going to be putting your corner. Now, sometimes guys have a great feel for the game, and maybe they can sense someone's getting behind them, and then they know that there's nothing threatening the middle of the field. But you got to look at it from the perspective of our opponent, right? They're going to want to turn this into a shootout because it's the only chance they have, to be quite honest. So what are you going to do? You're probably going to use CeeDee Lamb, or you're going to use, like, their tight end there. They have a really good tight end in Dallas. They're going to probably use those guys to try to either gain access by going and running like, something like a, seam route, or they're going to run like a skinny post or something, right, to draw the attention of that safety. So that way they can try to isolate with either CeeDee Lamb in isolation over there, or you're in isolation with basically George Pickens over there, which is a much bigger, stronger, contested catch type player going against potentially shorter corners. You see what I'm saying here, guys. I think it's a major test, actually. You got Dak Prescott as an experienced quarterback. He's put up some pretty big numbers across the league. I know that we all have pointed out his struggles in the playoffs, but it is the regular season. And this is, in my opinion, a pretty dang good test for the secondary. I think that's a legitimate concern. I can see where people are coming from the CB2 side of things. But I think what needs to be pointed out here is most people assume that you'll have safety help over there. And it depends upon the call. And it depends upon the safety and the way they're playing that tricks. I just want to point it out to you that there are definitely some examples to where we could easily in cover 8 and in quads, quarters-based coverage with a nickel in the game versus 3x1 sets, those guys could be in isolation, to be quite honest about it. It's what the tape shows me. It's what just knowledge of Vic's system tells me about how he plays things. Could be interesting, guys. This could be a very interesting, setup to see how we kind of come out of this and how we play. All right, y'all. These are my thoughts about this situation. I look forward to see how these guys play. And obviously I'm an Eagles fan. I want to see them afford themselves quite well in this game. All right, y'all. If you like this type of breakdown where we're talking about like coverages or, we're just breaking down the X's and O's of the game, you want to learn a little bit more about the Philadelphia Eagles, click this video right here where I actually break down the offense a little bit like that. Last year, I was the person who broke it and told everybody that they were running some Earhart Perkins in Philadelphia. And then you noticed everybody, after I made the video, started to act like they made that. All right, y'all. Peace. I'm out of here.